It's just fabulous to see you here. I want to honor you for giving up your only truly non-renewable resource to be here tonight. That is your time. You do realize that when we wrap up in an hour and a half, you'll be 90 minutes closer to death. And you're not going to get those 90 minutes back. I say that, and whenever I make this comment, people are like, oh, that's a bit... But it's so true, and I want to honor you for that, because it is the greatest gift you can give, is the gift of your time. It's your life. It's your attention. And I don't take it for granted. Around this country and around the world, there are a lot of people who don't want to invest more than a minute or two of watching a news clip to think about these matters and to let alone take action on them. So I'm so delighted that you're here, and I'm going to see if the technology will work for us. Ah, look at that. Magic. My life changed on October the 9th, 2023. So 2 days, less than 48 hours after the events of the 7th of October. So that was on the Saturday. On the Monday morning, my daughter Freya, she called me from Sydney University and said, Dad, the pro-Palestinians are planning an anti-Israel rally in Town Hall and we need to do something about it. So I phoned the police and I phoned the station commander, and he said to me, well, Mr. Leach, we're warning the Jewish community to stay out of the city today. Now, this was the day when they were going to light up the Opera House sails in blue and white as a sign of solidarity with Israel and the Jewish community. But no, they've got to stay out of the city. And then he said, and Mr. Leach, if you come into the city, we can't guarantee your safety. And then he said, and if you come into the city and you try and do anything to disrupt the rally, we will arrest you in order to prevent a breach of the peace. And so... I've lived in Australia now for 30 years, picked up some of the vernacular. So I hung up the phone and I thought to myself, bugger that. I just thought, no, you can't. The blood hadn't dried in the south of Israel. They were still chasing terrorists around the south. And we were going to give the center of our city to a bunch of terrorist-supporting thugs and exclude the Jews. And I thought that cannot be allowed to go unnoticed and unremarked and unopposed. So I put on a clerical shirt. I'm an Anglican minister. I play squash. So I took my squash bag, rolled up an Israeli flag, put that in the bag, walked down, caught a bus into the city. And if you know Sydney at all these rallies start in the square in the center of town, which is between the town hall building and the Anglican cathedral. And they share the ground. So I went and then stood on the steps of the cathedral while this started. And as the hate started to fill the square, I unfurled the Israeli flag and I stood there, and I did that to make a stand not just for Israel in their time of crisis, not just to show solidarity and support for the Jewish community, but I did it for Australia, because I thought it was vital that in this country we cannot let such hatred gain a foothold unopposed. And so I did that for Australia. And, I held it up, 1,000 eyes turned on me, all the cameras, and then a bunch of guys wrapped in keffirs chased me out of the square, threatening to slit my throat. And I ran around the cathedral, hid up on George Street, hid behind a police van, and they dispersed the thugs who were looking for me. And that changed my life. And after that, I started getting very involved in the Jewish community. And I'd be sitting at cafes in the city, and Jewish folk, Israeli folk would come up to me and thank me. And they were so grateful. And it was embarrassing because I just kept saying to them, don't thank me. I did nothing special. I just did what any decent person would do. Now, of course, the problem was most of the decent people didn't know what was happening, weren't aware, and a lot of them were and are in great danger of repeating the mistakes of the good, decent citizens of Germany in the 1930s. You see, what became so clear to me after that was that the very great risk for Australia, and particularly for the Christians in Australia, was that we behaved the way the good Christians of Germany did in this very Christianized country. 20% of the Christians supported Hitler, 20% opposed Hitler. It was the middle 60% who did nothing and were silent, didn't want to be political, didn't want to get involved. And for example, in Germany in the late 30s and early 40s, does anyone know what was the most common day of the week on which the German authorities would round up the Jews to take them to concentration camps? Saturday? Sunday. Why Sunday? Because the Christians were in church. The authorities would warn the pastors to keep their people in church, to sing loudly, so they wouldn't hear the sounds of their neighbors being dragged off to concentration camps. And I looked at Australia, and I thought, we can't let that happen here. We have to learn from history. For goodness sake, as Christians, we have a nearly 2,000-year history of treating Jewish people terribly. But that is a bug, not a feature of Christianity. It's not how it's meant to be. We should have learnt by now. We should have learnt from the 20th century. After all, as Christians, what's the definition of a Christian? Well, it's someone who follows a Jewish rabbi. That's what it is. We think this particular Jewish rabbi also happens to be God taken on flesh and come to undo the problems of all of humanity, and that he died and he rose again, but he's a Jewish rabbi. It's not just that Jesus was Jewish. Jesus is Jewish. So now think about what that means. That the doctrine of the incarnation and the Trinity tells us that now humanity is taken up into the very Godhead. Jesus rose again with a physical body, Christian theology tells us. And that humanity is now caught up into the three-person community of the Trinity. And Jesus didn't stop being Jewish when he returned to the Father and is seated at the right hand of the Father. So there's a Jew in heaven caught up into the divine being. Jesus is Jewish. Christians in Australia needed to know that, and they needed to be aware of what was going on and respond and take action. So a couple of us after church one Sunday night thought, we've got to do something. And so we had this idea, connected with the president of the Great Synagogue in Sydney and a friend in Canberra. And we had this idea of starting to run rallies around the country, led by Christians, in solidarity with the Jewish people to stand against anti-Semitism. And so Never Again Is Now was born. And we kicked off in Sydney with 10,000 people in the Domain. And then we did it all around the country. We did it up here in Brisbane. And then I looked around in about September last year, well, actually probably middle of the year, and I thought, I seem to have inadvertently started a national activist movement. How did that happen, Lord? And then it also became clear to me and my family that I couldn't keep running the church that I was pastoring in Sydney and doing this. So we stepped out in faith, and after 30 years of being an Anglican clergyman, I stepped out to lead this, because I believe we're in a critical time in Australia. What we're facing is not just a Jewish problem. It's not just a Jewish problem at all. In fact, we're in the middle of a clash of civilizations. And October 7 and the war in Gaza, the war in the Middle East, has brought that into focus. But this war has been going on for a long time, and we're in the middle of it. And the problem is that many, many, many Australians don't realize how serious it is, and that we need to take action. You see, Western civilization itself is under threat. The kind of values and institutions and ways of being Australian that have made this country such a fabulous place for all of us migrants, because we're all migrants, unless there are any Indigenous people here. And if you're Indigenous here, I want to honor you and thank you for your warmth and hospitality. But the rest of us, we all arrived from somewhere else. But we were brought in not just into a blank slate, but actually into a Western civilizational Judeo-Christian culture and institution with a 1,000-year history in England, that is on the basis of which we've built this country where we don't kill each other over religion anymore, where we don't kill people because of their sexual choices, where we value individual human rights and the right to life and all the good things that make this just such an amazing country, and all of that is under threat. Anti-Semitism is a warning sign. It's like a warning light on your car dashboard, and you could ignore that warning light for a very long time, or you can cover it over, or you can remove the fuse to turn off all the warning lights so it doesn't bug you. But in the end, the engine's going to blow up. Reality is what you run into when you're wrong. And when we're wrong about how the world works, in the end, things blow up and it hurts an awful lot of people. And anti-Semitism shows us, it's a warning light on the dashboard of our country saying there is a very, very real structural threat to our way of life and who we are. And we need to address that. We need to stand against it. We need to understand it, first of all. I thought I'd give you a little lecture in political theory. This is called the Overton window. And the Overton window is named after a political scientist, and it was an analysis of how ideas become public policy. In short, governments, politicians will only legislate policy that is acceptable to the mainstream of the population. So politics is downstream of culture. Now, politicians lead, but mostly the legislative agenda follows. What was unthinkable, so in our context, maybe support for jihadist terror organizations, walking down the streets of Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, showing support for Hamas and for Hezbollah and for the Ayatollah. I mean, unthinkable 5 years ago. Are you kidding? Unthinkable. But it's becoming acceptable to the mainstream population. And once this happens, these views can then become adopted as policy by political parties and in time become public policy. So, you know, I just, the little arrow, Zionism is racism. There was a motion, this was a motion in the UN back in the 70s, got passed, then got overturned and thrown out in the 80s, but it's back on the agenda now. It used to be only a few radicals thought that Zionists were racists. But it's actually become acceptable to say that and to think that and to believe that. So this is the problem with the radical fringes who are marching every week, is they take these ideas and they make them broadly acceptable, and then our media, the ABC and so on, repeat them and they get amplified on social media. And then over time, people come to think, yeah, that's sensible. That's really clear. You know, yeah, Zionism is racist. I mean, you know, they must be committing genocide in Gaza. It must be an Israeli agenda to cleanse the land of all Arabs. You know, it doesn't have to be based in fact. It just becomes acceptable, and then it seems to be sensible. Then it becomes popular, and once it's popular, then the government can enact it as policy. Okay, now, we're on a trajectory politically when we look at the movement of ideas where the isolation, sanctions against Israel, and legalized discrimination against Jewish people who are Zionists is a distinct possibility if this is unchecked. It seems unthinkable now that we could institutionalize discrimination against Jews. But just wait, it won't be if you're Jewish, you can't do X, Y, and Z. It will be what? If you're Zionist. How many of you here think that Israel has a right to exist? Okay, you're Zionists, you're racist baby killers. And as this pattern continues unchecked, the agenda behind it is to eventually make it so impossibly difficult to support Israel that people stop supporting Israel. That's the plan. Okay, so we've got to do something about that. And what are we going to do? Let's see what the next slide is. This is a choose your own adventure. How have we got here? Now, there are three sets of ideas, and these ideas, each one of those lines on that slide could become an hour-long lecture. I promise you they won't tonight, but it's just to try and give you a bit of a framework for what's going on that's got us into this point. Because if we're to address anti-Semitism, if we're to win the battle of civilizations that we face, you've got to go to the roots of the problem, not just chop off the fruit. There's another discussion which isn't here. There are also spiritual roots to this as well, which we might get to talk about a bit. So, all right. three sets of ideas that have got us to where we are, and I'll go over them quickly, and there'll be a lot of resources I plan to put out in the next 6 to 12 months to unpack this and get these ideas to start winning the battle of ideas. At the heart of it, there are two names that are the first one you're probably all familiar with, Karl Marx. So Karl Marx, enormously influential, and Marx, the most powerful legacy of Marx was he's embedded in our worldview a way of seeing all of reality, that reality and humanity can be simply broken up always into two competing groups. And the groups broadly are the oppressors and the oppressed. And history moves forward, and justice comes into the world, and peace comes into the world when the oppressed overcome the oppressors through revolution. In Marx's original writings, he thought of it in economic terms. So the oppressor was capital, the bourgeoisie, the capitalists who owned and controlled the means of production, and the oppressed were the workers. And Marx predicted that as the world got richer, there would be a revolution of the proletariat. The people would revolt against the capitalists, against capital, and heaven would arrive on earth. That didn't work, because what happened as we all progressed economically is the workers found out that they liked accumulating capital themselves, and everybody got rich, and they worked out there's no revolution. In fact, the only places that tried Marxist economic principles impoverished themselves. So that didn't deter the Marxists in how they see the world, because that framing is still incredibly significant. So our kids, and probably most of us, have been taught to see the world in these categories. So feminism, you just change who you label as oppressor and oppressed. So in feminist theory, who are the oppressors? Men. Who are the oppressed? Women. How will justice come when women rise up and overthrow the patriarchy? And of course, like the economic analysis, it doesn't work, because you know what you discover? Well, when you marry a woman, or a woman marries a man, justice doesn't come by overthrowing the man. It comes when you go to war with your own selfishness and love the other person and lock down together to push back the forces of chaos and hardship in life. And life doesn't work when you fight with other groups. Life works when you lock arms in bonds of deep mutual respect and love and go to war for goodness and try and raise a family and try and leave a legacy. So feminism doesn't work. But that didn't matter, because then, well, you just change the framing, right? So then it's like the radical environmentalists, right? So if you think about the radical green movement, who is being oppressed in the environmental movement? Or what's being oppressed? The environment's the oppressed. The world, Gaia, this organism that we live on, is being oppressed. Who are the oppressors? We are, all of us, our species. So the world would be better off without people. And maybe the world is going to overthrow us all. Now let's add the next name, Frantz Fanon. You probably haven't heard of him. But Frantz Fanon was an Algerian psychotherapist writing in the middle of last century. Algeria was a colony of France in North Africa, and there was a very, very, very vicious, brutal civil war in Algeria as the Algerians tried to get rid of the French colonial rulers. And Fanon wrote a book that became enormously influential in the universities and on the left, called The Wretched of the Earth. And Fanon took Marx's framing of oppressor-oppressed and he applied it to the process of decolonization. So now the oppressors are the colonial powers and the oppressed are those being colonized, the indigenous inhabitants, right? What Fanon did was he explored the psychological and existential reality of this revolution of the oppressed indigenous inhabitants against the colonial rulers. And he sacralized violence. That is, Fanon said the only way that the oppressor colonial powers could be overthrown was through violence. And violence was good, necessary, and always justified. History couldn't move forward to a place of utopian peace without violence. Okay? So now, every time you hear on the streets of our cities people saying resistance is justified, I don't know if you've heard people talking, when people who want to support Hamas and attack Israel, they say, well, resistance is always justified. October the 7th was justified. You know what? They are quoting Fanon. It's exactly what he said. And that idea has fed into all of our university humanities departments. And these ideas from Marx and Fanon and this framing have primed our culture in the West to turn against Israel, because in the current situation, when you listen to the narrative, who's the oppressor in the Middle East? Israel. And who's the oppressed? The plucky Palestinians. And that is a very powerful narrative. And we have to take it very seriously and understand people who believe that don't believe it because they're stupid or evil. They believe it because they've been taught it from when they were at kindergarten, and now they're just slotting in to that existing way of understanding the world, the current issues. Okay? Now, it's been a clear strategy of the Arab world, of the PLO, of the Ayatollah, of the Muslim Brotherhood, who we'll get to in a moment, they understand this extremely well, to make Palestinianism the great social justice cause in the Western world, because it's a way in which they can divide and cause division and conflict from within. There was a Jewish rabbi once who said something about this. He said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. So, it takes us to our second block of ideas. That's Arab nationalism and the Muslim Brotherhood. So the Arab nationalists in Egypt and elsewhere were all going to get educated in Europe from about the 1830s onwards. And by the 1940s and 1950s, the Arab nationalists were steeped in Karl Marx, they were steeped in postmodern theory, and they were steeped in Frantz Fanon. And they understood their own plight as Arabs, or their own situation as Arabs, as being informed by this dynamic. And so what was required to overcome the humiliation and the dispossession and the failure of the Ottoman Empire, dismantled as it was by the Allied forces through the First World War, what was required was a resurgence, violent resistance against the West, and a development of an Arab national identity over against any Western forces, which included Israel. The emergence of the State of Israel in 1947, 1948 was a great affront to this, and an affront to the whole way of seeing the world. And it was necessary in this framing for Arab nationalists to destroy Israel as part of the process of moving history forward and achieving utopia and peace on earth. Now, that was the nationalists. In addition to the Arab nationalists, there's another stream, and that's the last little phrase, they're the Muslim Brotherhood. So rather than just a purely Marxist understanding, then there were a group of Arabs who thought it's not just economics, it's not just politics, it's not just national identity. The real reason we Arabs are falling behind the West is, what do you think? It's because you're not pure enough as Muslims. You're compromised. You've got into bed with the West. You're not observing Sharia perfectly. God is not blessing you. The way to overthrow the West, the way to bring history to its great conclusion, was to purify Islam and extend its rule from the position of being the oppressed, the weak, the vulnerable, the victims, even though, Arab Islamism is an incredibly successful colonizing power if you look at the map of the Middle East and North Africa over the last 1400 years. But the Muslim Brotherhood and the jihadists, who are now represented by people like Hamas, and ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Jolani in Syria, the way to bring heaven on earth is by being uber pure Muslims. And all of that came together on October the 7th, and we see what it looks like. And we see what it looks like on our streets and in Australia, right? Now the question is, if that's the case, why do we in the Western world give a free pass to jihadists and Marxist jihadists who support terror? That seems strange, doesn't it? Okay, you go, is it because we're weak or stupid or afraid? Not really. That takes us to our last box, which is we as a culture exist in what the historians of ideas call the post-1948 liberal consensus, by which I mean this. So strap yourselves in. Let me ask you a question. Between 1914 and 1948, so the period from the start of the World War I to the end of the fighting in Central Europe, how many people did our civilization massacre? How many people died in that period, in the wars of that period? Millions? Quite a lot. I mean, 6 million Jews were killed, right? So it's got to be more than that. Okay, so historians estimate somewhere between 130 and 200 million people were slaughtered in that period. One Jewish historian I read describes it as a civilizational Shoah. The Shoah, the Holocaust that killed the Jews, but it's we're removed from that horror. And one of the advantages of being an Anglican minister is, we have lots of old churches. And in my church in Sydney and my church in Melbourne before that, we had honor boards at the back of the church that listed the names of all the young men who had served and who had died in that period in World War I and World War II. And there were lots. In working class Balmain, where our church was, something like a quarter of the young men did not come back from that war. That is we have no idea what that does to a society. That's, beyond comprehension of the average Aussie. That, out of that experience, the big question facing the Western world was, how do we stop ourselves slaughtering each other in this way ever again? There was another writer, a guy called Karl Popper, who was fled Austria. He was working as an academic in New Zealand. He ended up at the London School of Economics. And Popper wrote a book, published in 1948. It's a great book. It's 800 pages. I have a copy of it. It's an amazing read. The title of his book was The Open Society. Okay? And Karl Popper had a Jewish student who came and studied at the London School of Economics, and Popper was a mentor of his, and he became a billionaire. Can anyone guess his name? The Open Society? George Soros. That's the name of his foundation. And he learned it from Karl Popper. Now, before you think, Antichrist, conspiracy theory, Satan, I'm sure you were all thinking that. Let me tell you, what Popper and the post-1948 people developed was a very well thought out way to stop us slaughtering each other in our civilization. And basically what it said was, to stop this endless slaughter culturally, we had to embrace being open to each other. Bring down the borders. You don't, like Germans, you don't have to go and invade France all the time. Just bring down your borders and let the French bring their baguettes to Germany and the Germans bring their sausages to France, and just share and be open to each other, and, let the Poles come in and welcome everybody into your home. And once you're really open, you're not going to kill each other, right? Makes sense. It worked. Be open. And, and you've got to be open to the world, to new experiences, open to other truths. Your truth, my truth. There's no one truth. The problem is if you think you're the one who knows the truth, you could saddle up and go to war against someone who you disagree with. So just admit that you've got your truth, and we're open to all truths and all people. Okay, we're open. But it's pretty good. It's better than going to slaughter people. And then you got to be weak. And I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but you see, the great problem between 1914 and 1948 was what they called and the great fear as a result was the authoritarian personality. What you don't want is a strong leader, a Hitler, a Mussolini, a Stalin, who will be a strong person who will manipulate a whole country and lead you into civilizational slaughter. So, just be weak. Don't be strong enough to go to war and slaughter each other. And your faith, you can be a Christian, but be a weak Christian. You don't want to hold too strongly to any ideology or any faith. So the Catholic Church reinvented itself after the World War II as part of this. They had a thing called the Second Vatican Council, where a bunch of people who were utterly traumatized and shaped by the events between 1914 and 1948, and a bunch of theologians who were all part of developing this liberal consensus, helped the Catholic Church rewrite its doctrines. Here's one of the things they did prior to the Second Vatican Council. The Catholic Church was a strong faith. If you weren't Catholic, you were going to hell. Pretty straightforward, right? But that's very strong and very closed. You might even kill people over those ideas. So Vatican II was like, let's just be weak Catholics. And so a theologian called Karl Rahner and his contemporaries, Rahner in particular, introduced this idea of the anonymous Christian. So, you can be a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Muslim, but actually still be a Christian, but just not know it. And now we can laugh at that, but you go, that's a really sensible way to stop people slaughtering each other over religion. You just go, well, you're actually one of us anyway. And one day you'll wake up and realize you're a Catholic. That's shaped us very much, so even in Australia, not even, like here, what does Christianity mean in Australia today? Well, you can be a Christian, but just do it on a Sunday morning, once a month, twice a month for an hour and a half. Say your prayers privately. Believe what you want to believe. Don't impose it on anyone else. Yeah, it's 1948. This is us. And then you got to be disenchanted. And what do they mean by that? Disenchanted means give up on your grand ideas of land and folk and identity and destiny and meaning and purpose. And don't do that, because then you're going to saddle up and go to war and kill people. Rather, empty the world of ultimate meaning, because that leads you to war, and just settle for a nice middle-class job, a good pension, paying off your mortgage. If you're in Sydney, a harbour view if you're lucky. Your annual holiday, maybe to Bali. Keep your marriage together, raise your kids, but just not to be fanatical. And, and then just peacefully die. But just don't kill everyone else on the way, right? Which is kind of a good thing. Like, it's not a good idea to go and slaughter each other. But the strategy to achieve that was to produce a whole generation that are disenchanted. A culture since 1948 that has worked to do that. Now, what does that have to do with anti-Semitism and Israel? The Arab world did not get that memo. Hamas did not get that memo. Israel has not had the luxury of living that way. And increasingly, neither are we. The strong gods are back. This consensus worked when we were all basically Christians within the Anglosphere and Western Europe. It's fine then. But it doesn't work when people want to kill you. So this is why in Australia, the worst thing that could happen is you believe that your culture is better than someone else's culture, that it's worth defending, that you need to keep people out. This is why we give a free pass to the jihadists, because we've got to be open to them. I mean, their truth is no different to our truth, right? And we can't saddle up and go to war. We've got to, if we're nice to them and we're open and we welcome them in, then they too will live a disenchanted life, and they too will just settle down, raise their kids, have their 3 or 4 wives, their 25 kids. But they'll be middle class like us, and it'll be great. We'll all just get along. That's what we really believe and think and hope, because that strategy has worked really well. We haven't had a mass European, slaughter since 1948. That's a good thing. But the time has come when that strategy alone has run its course and is leading us to be weak. It leads us to a place where we are like a Labrador puppy school of foreign policy and politics, where it's just like, I'm a cute ball of fluff and you got to like me as I roll over and you rub my stomach, and we'll all be happy as a bunch of cute Labrador puppies. The problem is the world is full of Rottweilers, right? There is evil in the world. And we can't deny that or pretend it's not there, because let me remind you, as I'm trying to remind Australia, reality is what you run into when you're wrong. This is what the lovely, liberal Jewish people in the south of Israel discovered on October the 7th. Lovely, lefty, peacenik Jews, largely from a European Ashkenazi background, who had grown up and believed that consensus. So let's open the borders to the Gazans. Let's bring them into our homes. Let's show them love. Let's take their kids to hospital in Israel. Let's educate them. Let's give them economic empowerment. And those are really wonderful, beautiful, good things to do. Don't get me wrong. Brilliant things to do. Problem was, they didn't get the memo that they were supposed to become good Western liberals as a result of that. They were evil jihadist terrorists who took that weakness and came to the little Labrador puppy saying, tickle my tummy, and they slit its throat and they raped its women and children and they took them hostage. Okay? Welcome to the 21st century. And it's a scary thought. Like, it gives me no great joy to talk like this. But we have to understand what's going on. To address these ideas, we have to understand why people hold them, at least as better than they understand it. So then we can start to say, oh, there's a way forward. There's a way through this. Now, here's why I'm passionate about Christianity. You know what the answer is to all of this? Let's go back to the Bible. The Bible tells a better story. The Bible, that story, and our values and our institutions and our structures in the West come straight out of the Torah. So, for example, I'll give you one quick example of how this needs to be worked out and thought out. What does it mean to be a human being? How do we understand humanity? Do we group them together in good and bad? Is that how history works, through endless conflict between groups? No. The Bible says this: you and I, every single human being, is a metaphysically glorious being. That is, every single person is made in the image of God. And they're incredible. And that imago Dei, that image of God, is never erased in us. Right? But we're also simultaneously, paradoxically, each and every one of us capable of extraordinary evil. We are morally flawed. We are tragic beings. You see, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the Soviet writer who became a believer in Jesus in the Russian Gulag and wrote a book, a very famous book, that was partly responsible for the downfall of the Soviet Union, called the Gulag Archipelago, as his writings exposed the horrors of Stalinist Russia and the Gulag system. Solzhenitsyn famously said, in the Gulag he discovered that the line between good and evil doesn't run between people, between tribes, between ethnic groups or nation states. The line between good and evil runs through each and every human heart. Every concentration camp guard in Nazi Germany went home after a long, hard day of torture and death and made love to their wife and cuddled their kids. The image of God in them is not erased. That's what makes that evil so awful. But hey, guess what? Here in Australia, here in this room, that's true for me, that's true for you. We're all in this battle together as one common humanity. And we have to tell that story because it stops us dividing into nice simplistic groups and turning people against each other. That's the better story of the Bible that we've got to tell, and we've got to unpack and show the political implications of that and the foreign policy implications of that. And it's the best description of the human experience imaginable, understanding that we are, as Blaise Pascal said, the glory and the garbage of the universe is critical to make marriages work and to raise kids. And let me tell you this, how does history reach its final conclusion? What's going to bring in the kingdom of heaven? What's going to bring peace to this earth? Is it going to be revolution? Is it going to be a global empire? No, we know. How is evil overcome? Through suffering. Suffering, sacrificial love. Like the political implications of the cross of Jesus Christ are enormous. When God wraps himself up in the form of a Jewish rabbi and steps onto the stage of human history to go face to face, toe to toe with evil. How does he do it? With armies? He says, no. I could have whistled up an army of angels. How did he do it? By creating a mass movement? How did he do it? By being utterly rejected, dying alone, and in love, absorbing into his own being all the evil of the world and saying to Satan, all the principalities of powers and all the evil of humanity, do your worst. I will absorb it all into my own being and I will allow it to kill me. And then in love, the Father will raise me up triumphant. And history will turn on that hinge. And we will know that the way evil will be overcome in my heart, in your heart, in every jihadist's heart, and in the nature of this world and all of reality itself, evil will be overcome through suffering, sacrificial love, which sometimes also needs the Mossad. Because in this liberal consensus, I thought that was funny as well, thanks. In this consensus, what we've done in the churches often is we've taken what I've just said about the death of Jesus and we've made that weak and nice. And when Jesus says, love your neighbor, turn the other cheek, pray for those who persecute you, we read that as roll over and be a little sort of golden Labrador puppy. Now his ethical teaching and that way of love is very complicated, how you live that out. And the turn the other cheek is about an interpersonal ethic, how I treat you. It doesn't really say, well, I would say this, the ethic of love demands that a national government, as an act of love, protects its citizens. Stopping your own citizens being slaughtered is the most loving thing and requirement of a government. So sometimes you got to go to war to make love. Now that's a difficult, we struggle with that. I get hammered all the time, and even saying this, the pushback I've got from Christian friends and colleagues about this. And I'll tell you, the church needs to lead in this pushback against the evil in the world, because we're shaped and modeled by the love of Jesus. We own our own evil and our own complexity and the paradox of our own existence. And so we're not going to give in to hate and vengeance and retribution. That's, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So we don't go to fight for our civilization out of fear. The Bible says, the most oft repeated command in the Bible is, do not fear because I'm with you, says the Lord. So we don't do it out of fear because God is with us. We don't do it out of hatred because our hatred has been crucified with Christ, and we will always walk in the way of love, even if we have to go to war. Now there's a paradox and a complexity. The war in Israel is being fought and won by 18 to 22-year-old reservists, beautiful young people. And when they go into Gaza, they are participating in evil. But they're doing it because of the strong love they have for their mums and their dads and their grandparents who they're protecting. So you can go to war out of love. And love has to constrain how you engage in war and in politics and in everything. So what the church needs to do in Australia is take up the responsibility to love not just our own little lives, not just our own generation, but if we're going to love our grandkids and our great-grandkids who we'll never see, we need to push back the evil now. And we need to have a national conversation about the kind of country we want to leave our kids. And we need to do that by renewing our commitment to Western civilization. So that's what I'm trying to do. Everything we're trying to do at Never Again is just an act of love. Like, that's it. I'm just trying the best I can to every day trust Jesus to show me how to overcome evil with good and how to live in love for my neighbor, my Muslim neighbor, my Hindu neighbor, my Jewish neighbor, and my neighbor who hasn't yet been born but will be born in 100 years' time or 50 years' time. And I want them to inherit the same extraordinary country and culture and civilization that has welcomed and blessed me these last 30 years. It's just about love. So what are we trying to do? At a high level, our vision is to unite all Australians against anti-Semitism, and by doing this, to ensure Australia remains a beacon of the best of Western civilization, evidenced by a flourishing Jewish community and the steadfast support of the State of Israel. Because if we can do that, then every other minority will be safe and protected as well. And Christians will be safe and protected. But we have to go into bat for this. I really do believe. Our strategy is to educate and activate the 60 to 70% of Australians who are the winnable middle. That's us all. We don't have to worry about the people who are already sold up, signed up Zionists. We don't have to worry about the folk who are jihadist supporting leftists. Like, we're not going to win them over. It's the winnable middle that we need to work with. There's a bunch of us. So what we want to do is lead the national conversation, fuel bold thought leadership and advocacy that shapes public opinion, put our voices, these ideas, front and center through high-impact speaking engagements. It seems to me this message that God is giving me as a result of the last 30 years of reading and studying and my own crazy background as a Jewish Catholic Anglican whose brother converted to Islam, who's lived all around the world, grown up through war, seen suffering and evil as a kid face to face my entire life, has a certain thick skin as a result, and then has spent 30 years trying to convince Anglican Christians that Jesus is Jewish and they should change the world in love, with varying degrees of success and failure. We've got to put this out. We've got to win the battle of ideas. And we've got to amplify truth in the mainstream and independent media. If we want a genuinely free country, people need to what? Know the truth. People say the truth will set you free, only it won't. Jesus said, if you know the truth will set you free. You've got to know it, so we've got to tell it. We've got to articulate it. We've got to argue for it. So we're looking to do a whole bunch of stuff on media. My daughter Freya is fighting the good fight on Sky and other places, and they're incredibly supportive of her, and I'm very proud of her. But wherever I go, everyone goes, "Oh, you know, Freya is amazing." And I go, "Yes, she is." Problem is, we need 50 or 60 or 100 Freyas. We need a generation of young people who will stand up and take this mantle on, and work with us oldies to renew our culture and fight for the coming generations. And then we're going to do tours to Israel, and then we want to build a grassroots movement. That's what's happening. That's where you all come in. Our vision is that we'll have people all around the country who are in churches mobilized to articulate and advocate and act on these ideas, activate political connections to shift culture and policy at every level. Join a political party, get involved, make sure that no one ever gets pre-selected or elected who is anti-Western civilization, who's anti-Israel, who's anti-Jewish, who's pro-terrorism. And develop a talent pipeline of young leaders. Simply put, our mission, I was trying to make this, because this all sounds very highfalutin, and I'm sorry if I've bored you to tears. If I've helped you sleep, though, that's okay. I should have been an anesthetist. I studied medicine. I should have gone into anesthetics because I have a great capacity to put people to sleep, and I don't need medicine. I just talk at them for hours. Our mission is to mobilize Middle Australia to push back the hate that's infecting our country. And it is hate. And we've got to push it back. We're going to push it back with love, and we're going to push it back with the truth, and with the truth of the ideas and the way of Jesus. But we've got to push it back. We can't just take it. We can't just let it come in and capture our streets and capture our institutions and capture our political parties and capture our churches. You got to push it back, man. You got to, I don't know if you guys play rugby up here, but like you got to get in the scrum, man. You got to lock arms and go head to head with evil. The vision, it's a grandiose vision, but it shouldn't be too hard. 1 million everyday Australians united and committed to pushing back anti-Semitism. Now we've got a ways to go. There's whatever, I don't know, 100 of us here. So we're almost there. Yeah, it's a start. You know, I mean, no, the Jesus movement started with like no one. They all abandoned, well, apart from the women. Okay, so we'll build a movement on women. The church, that's great. So what's our strategy? We have pledges that we're asking people to make, a pledge to stand against anti-Semitism. We've got copies of it posted up on the wall, but it's on our website. And I'd encourage you to go to the website, australiansagainstantisemitism.org, and sign a pledge. Read it. It's a pretty comprehensive and compelling document. And then use that to get other people. Share that with your friends on Facebook, email, print it out, take it to school. And we just want to start the national conversation and get people on there signing it. Because we think if you get 1 million people, that's enough to shift the culture big time, who understand the issues and are going to act in love. And again, if we understand anti-Semitism and what's going on, and we act against it, we will be renewing all of Western, all of our deep cultural underpinnings. And we also want to start an annual Australians Against Anti-Semitism Day with tens of thousands participating in simultaneous rallies around the country. So last year we ran the rallies sort of sequentially around the country. So because, because I'm prone to not think things through, I went, why don't we do them all on the same time, on the same day? Because that's going to be easy. So that's what we want to do. So October the 19th, we want to get Australia right. And we want to do it every year around October time to say this is one day in the year where we're hoping churches around the country will pray against anti-Semitism, pray for Israel, write some prayers, do some liturgy for it. And then wherever there are people who think hating Jews is a bad idea, they'll get together, log into our live stream, watch the speeches, be part of it, buy our merch, stand in our Australians Against Anti-Semitism t-shirts, wave an Australian flag, and commit to another year of fighting the good fight. The plan is to make these go viral. You might be thinking to yourself, well, what can I do? Well, one of the ideas I've had, and this may be a really bad one, but we'll see, is to have teams of people going out in 3s or 4s and take your phone or an iPad, take an A-frame, which with our Australians Against Anti-Semitism logo and so on, put on an Australians Against Anti-Semitism t-shirt, so you look like, and then go to a high traffic area like a supermarket or the car park of the largest mega church in the area, and stand there and together start the conversation. Say, hey, we think hating Jews is a bad idea. What do you think? Oh, no, I love hating Jews. Okay, well, next. Okay, so then, oh, no, what do you think about hating Jews? No, I think hating Jews is a really bad idea. Well, would you like to sign a pledge and put your name to this because we're wanting to shift the national conversation on this, and pull out your iPad, have a look at it, scroll through, enter their details, hit send. They get an email saying they've done it, and we add them to the database, and you can do something. Now, up here, that should be super easy, because I don't think there's many people up here who think hating Jews is a bad idea. But what we've got to do is give them a voice. And we need to give them a voice that the politicians and the culture makers hear. What can you do? Sign and share the pledge. You could go to our website. I'll put the QR code up in a moment. AustraliansAgainstAntisemitism.org. There's a drop-down menu. Sign the pledge. You can sign up for the rallies. We might need to make it regional here in Queensland, so let me rethink that. Sign up to volunteer, be part of a pledge signing team. Like, it really, all the merch is available. You can get the t-shirts, lovely branded t-shirts, blue and white, Australians Against Anti-Semitism with a QR code to our website on the back. And I would love it if maybe your church could go, as a Connect group, we'll just experiment with this. And then let Jennifer know how it went. I don't know where you'd go to do it, but you know this area, and just see what it's like. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You get stabbed, blown up, run over by a car. But listen, the blood of the martyrs, the seed of the church. Your elders have just called this the new church growth strategy. You can't give in to, don't be afraid, man. Don't be afraid. Fear is the currency of terrorists. It's not the currency of the kingdom of heaven. Organize, talk to your church, talk to your pastor, say, we want to get behind this. Pray. Pray for me, pray for our movement, pray for the Jewish community, pray for Australia, pray for the governments, all those in authority over you. Give and get. It takes money, a lot of money. And you may not have a lot of money, and that's fine, doesn't matter. But pray that God raises up people who have lots of money, who want to give very generously to this, and help raise money for it. And so the goal is our opponents in this fight are very, very well funded, to the tune of billions and billions of dollars, even here in Australia, from Qatar and other places. And generate ideas and energy. I mean, this is a long-term fight, and I'm so excited and energized to see people here in your church to say, this is the mission of the church, to love. It's just love. And you guys get it, and it's wonderful. And so I'm going to stop now. And this is an opportunity to stand up, to lead, and shape a future for our country free of anti-Semitism and division. And will you join us on this journey? Scan me. So that'll take you to the website. I'm going to stop now and take questions, if you have any questions. Yeah, so the question was, one of the things about the way our Western culture and civilization is changing is the way our kids are taught in school. And did I have any thoughts on that? I have lots and lots and lots of thoughts on that. 2 words: homeschooling. Maybe. But another 2 words: Christian schooling. And then... And that said, like, we weren't homeschoolers. We sent our kids to a Christian school in Sydney, and most of their friends were woke, but the institution was deeply Christian, and they had a fabulous. So I think deeply Christian education is worth funding and fighting for, in the home or in the schools. The next 2 thoughts I'd say are, one, we need to recapture the education departments at the universities, those who teach the teachers, because the teachers are completely embedded in the post-48 liberal consensus, in the kind of neo-Marxist structuring or framing of the world. So we should do that. But finally, what I'd say is, the most important institution that educates children is the home, is the family. And the church, as an extended family, So we need strong families with parents who understand. And this is, again, straight out of the Torah. The book of Deuteronomy is so clear that the fundamental duty of the parents is to transmit the faith to the kids and the values and the practices. So parents need to be equipped to do that. And churches, as a collection of families of multi-generations, need to work together to help parents do that, to honor and value parents who try to do that, because it's really hard to do that. We've structured a society where it's almost impossible. I don't know what it's like up here, but where I live and work, it's almost impossible to exist on one income, unless it's an enormous income. And so our whole society is structured to actually take kids out of the influence of the parents and put them in state-run orphanages, which we call childcare centers. And that's problematic, right? And so then, this is a long answer to your question, sorry. So to renew the institution of marriage and family, we need to honor that. Honor it deeply and say it's more honorable to make your marriage work and to create lots of little mini gods that you raise to be decent human beings. There is more honor in that than in becoming the CEO of a blue chip company. And that is so monstrously countercultural. I mean, your church is probably way more spiritual than mine ever was. I mean, in my church, everyone would give lip service to the kingdom of God, but the lived values were what was most important for the kids was to be high achievers with a great university degree and a tremendous career one day so they could earn a lot of money. That's how we all lived, to our shame. And then you wonder why the kids don't grow up with a well thought out, spiritually formed life and a mind on fire with the ideas of the kingdom, right? So it's a challenge. I mean, in our family, our kids resisted the woke amongst their friends because we had dinner together every night and I was there for them. And I think the church is vital in that, right? You need a level, let me tell you this. So I won't tell you how to run your church, but in a church like yours, and I'm assuming a lot of you are here from Flame Tree, if you've got this beautiful multi-generational experience, you don't get this anywhere else in our society anymore. And so what you've got to do is figure out ways to unlock the ways for the generations to bless and honor each other and invest upwards and downwards. Yeah. And when your pastor says that, you need to do more than just nod. You need to go, yeah, I'm up for that, man, and open yourself up. Young men need older men in their lives. I survived to the extent I'm a vaguely functioning human being and have managed to keep my marriage vaguely together. My wife tells me I'm happy, it's great. It's because there were older men in the church I ended up who reparented me because I had no models of fatherhood and parenting. And so the church is vital in this. And we need to honor pastors and leaders. We need to honor each other for showing up. Everybody says in our society, we're all lonely and we all want community. But people aren't willing to pay the price of community, right? Like I'll give you a price. Like, people are just annoying. So that's the beauty of church. You get woven together in bonds of mutual love with annoying people who you didn't choose. And guess what? That's like a family as well. In marriage, God has designed it that we get tricked by infatuation into marrying someone, and then we discover over the next 50 years that they're unbelievably annoying. And the good news is you're that annoying to them, but that's the last time you get to choose in a family. After that, it's given to you, and your kids don't get to choose we don't get to choose who we're born into. And that's what church is. And so that's actually what forms us. It's the reality of the good and the evil in every person and how to overcome evil with good in the lived experience of a local church. It's precious, and we're losing it. I I haven't spent a lot of time talking to politicians, to be honest, because the Jewish organizations invest a lot in that. And so I've sort of, that's their lane to lobby politicians and work. But I've done a bit of it. And we've had politicians at all our rallies. And I've spent some time in Canberra going door to door with politicians' offices. So here's the thing about politicians. We all grow up thinking that this country inside Canberra, there's this little room with this bunch of, a small group of unbelievably intelligent, thoughtful, wise, selfless people who understand what is going on and also have the ability to influence what's going on. They've got their hands on all the levers of power. And you know what? When you meet politicians, you discover that they are people like us. There are some brilliant ones, and there are some very frail ones. And even the brilliant ones don't have nearly as much power as we think they do. It's a vast, complex system. They need our prayers. It's a thankless task. My daughter and her husband both are strongly committed to lives of public service and see politics as a calling on their lives. And as a dad, that is not something I would choose for my kids if I were interested in them having an easy life or a well-remunerated life. It's hard, it's thankless, it's endless attacks, it's difficult on your family, it's complex. So we should pray for them. And then what we've got to do, in fact, I was on the phone to Freya earlier today and we were talking about this and said, we have to encourage, we get the politicians we deserve. So we have to encourage a better caliber of person to nominate for pre-selection and get elected. Okay, so how does that happen? You got to join the parties and have a voice. And then we've got to honor young people. We've got to honor people who are called by God into politics. And we've got to encourage Christian young people to understand that public service of that nature is a vital contribution to the common good. And we've got to encourage young people to do that. And then we've got to stand with them. And then we've got to not criticize them when they stuff up and they compromise and they say stuff that you don't agree with, because they will. So here's what you can do as a Christian, you can just notice when your local MP or councillor or federal MP does something good and flood them with love and praise and honor when they do something good. It's going to increase the likelihood that they do another good thing. Because what we tend to do is notice when there's a problem, and then we write and criticize them. And none of us like that. I mean, I respond much better to love than I do to criticism, right? I suspect that's true of you. I know it's true of politicians because they're human like us. So there's some practical thoughts. Look, that's why we did the rallies last year, and everything we do, we bring Christians and Jews together. You don't have a lot of Jewish people up in this part of the world. It's a tiny little group, and they're kind of dispersed. But that's exactly what we should be doing, standing together. We've also decided to do the rallies just on one day because all the polling shows Middle Australia doesn't like the idea of Middle Eastern conflicts being brought onto the streets of our cities. So this may have been a wrong strategic decision. We decided to do a couple of big rallies and leave the weekly annoy the city to the Palestinians and not pick a fight and not want to bring that conflict onto the streets. I'm not sure now that was the right decision. Maybe we should have, right from the get-go, had counter-protests en masse. But the average Aussie didn't want to do that. And the Jewish community didn't want to do that. So we've done what we've done. October the 19th is the great opportunity to see how many people we can get out. It's not easy to get people out, you know. People are busy, lazy, scared, unaware. To say, you know, so it's okay. We just do I was always taught any one person with God is a distinct majority in every situation. Yeah. Well, that's how the question was, the 60% of people who are Middle Australia and are silent and uninvolved, how do we get them involved? Well, when you figure that out, please let me know. I'll tell you what happens. I don't have so if you have, what you got to do is go to the 4 people who are closest to you. And if 4 people talk to 4 people, talk to 4 people, talk to 4 people, soon, you fill the world. So my strategy, it's the way the gospel spreads as well. It's just one person at a time. I have a really I want to win. The kingdom of God grows one heart at a time. You change one mind at a time. And mostly people's minds are changed on this matter through conversations with people they trust. So I wish I had a better plan. But I think that's the plan, equipping the church, mobilizing Christians to have the conversations, the pledge, getting people, putting it in front of people, saying, hey, geez, I'm really concerned about the way Jews are being treated in Australia. And so I've signed this pledge. Is this something you'd sign? Because we just think this is wrong. I use the analogy, I say, we all treat our kids to stand up to bullies in the playground. So why are we all happy to stand back and watch the Jews being bullied in Australia? That's not Australian, is it? Yeah, and any other ideas gratefully received. But I think it's one at a time. The media is biased. One of the problems is most journalists now don't see their job as reporting the truth. They see they see their role as a platform to advocate for a cause. So that's a betrayal of the institution of journalism, in my view. And we need to recapture what it is to be a journalist. And to be a journalist, particularly in the public broadcaster, is not to bring you're not there to advocate for a cause. And you need to allow the institution to limit what you say. It's the same with teachers and nurses and doctors. Everyone sees their jobs as a platform to advocate for a cause. You can't just do your jolly job, Teach the kids how to read and write. Don't teach them critical race theory and, that Palestinian freedom is necessary for the freedom of the world. I think the challenge in media is very great, because while groups like the ABC and, the commercial TV channels may be biased, their influence is dwindling. So basically, if you're under 30, you get your views about politics and life from TikTok. So you've got to be on TikTok and Instagram and the alternate media. So we're trying to raise a bunch of money to build that platform out, because our opponents do. I mean, the propaganda on TikTok is just extraordinary, and Instagram and Facebook. So you have raised a very, very real question. But reality is what you run into when you're wrong, and there's enough people are waking up to the fact that this narrative and this bias isn't working and doesn't work. And I actually think, here's my prediction. I think Israel, we'll edit this out. I wonder if Israel is going to emerge from this in such a strong geopolitical and strategic position that it is going to have to cause a major rethink amongst our political leadership and media elites. And there's going to be energy for that rethink, and we need to lead that rethinking. I think that could happen. It could, of course, go the other way. Predictions are always tricky, particularly when they're to do with the future. Yeah. I mean, the ABC, I was on the Compass program about a month ago. So, there is an openness to have alternate voices. We'll see. I might wrap it up then. Thank you so much.